This is Paul again with the Curators podcast. This is our noon series, and I'm really excited to have two of our favorite gentlemen from the Kennedy grassroots movement, Missouri natives, Andrew Cottingham and Lloyd Sloan. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having
Thank
us,
you.
Paul.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And the reason I'm excited to have you guys here is because you have developed a model called the Equality Freedom Model, the EF model, and there's a lot of political implication here. Our discussions and what I've learned about it's a simple concept, but it has deep meaning, and I love that combination. I think that's something that can be explained to people and in a very easily understandable way, and then begin to move in that direction politically. So, I'm going to start with Lloyd. Lloyd, you're writing a book called Whig Solutions: The Upper Left, the direction that can fix America's problems, and you're going to explain the importance of the upper left. I know you were a Harvard grad in 1978. That makes us about the same age, I think. And
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
and you were also you've got some experience at this. You were a coordinator for the Ron Paul campaign in 2012.
Yes.
And you've been politically active for most of your life, it appears. So could you just spend 2 minutes explaining to us this concept of the EF grid and why it matters? Thank you.
Yeah, with that, I mean, people can see the grid that's up there, I guess, so that may help, and then they can visualize it that way. It's based on two simple questions. Call it EF because it's equality, freedom. The first question is an equality question. Is wealth too unequal? The answer, yes or no. That determines the left or right position. The up and down position is determined by called the freedom question. Is government too big? And we all struggle with that left-right political axis that we were taught since high school and get frustrated by it and lack of definitions. My background is economics, mathematics. I like to have well-defined terms. I don't like it when people call me a radical, extreme, leftist, rightist, whatever, and don't at least tell me what they mean by left and right. And so you stumbled across this very simple model. The upper left are the ones who answer yes to both questions. And I started to realize that's me. I actually do think government's too big, but I also think, you make a case that the wealth's too unequal. And I realized I'm not sure there's political parties that represent that. And maybe that explained why I voted for Bernie in a donkey primary and why I supported Ron Paul and was a CD2 coordinator for him. And, because it would probably freak out Sean Hannity, but it actually does make sense if you see me as being in that upper left. And I guess that's the gist of it. That pretty much, I guess that explains it, I hope. I do understand people don't like left and right, that they get frustrated by it. And maybe this will help them at least look at it more rationally and say, this is one way to define left-right, which frankly works for Karl Marx and it works for George Bush and it goes back to the French Revolution and explains that too. So I can make a pretty good case that that's it. And then you add this second dimension and this second question, which is also very important in politics to a lot of people like me. I really do think that if you ask me to prioritize, I think the size of government is a major issue with me. And so I tend to be as much up as I am left or right, Anyway.
Sure. And just so everyone understands, when you're talking about this white section of the grid, upper left, we're not talking about left politics, like left-wing politics. We're talking about basically a northwest quadrant, which is what at least I view as the best of both worlds. We want smaller government and we want more equality. And the question is, how do we achieve that, right? Would you agree with that, Andrew?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to add? Do you want to talk about the donkey and the elephant there, or?
Well, I think that it is fair to say that the lower left is absolutely dominated by Democrats. And I do tend to say donkey elephant, so I apologize if it offends anybody. I don't have a lot of respect for the two-party system, so I sometimes will offend people who do, and I may go back to saying donkey elephant a lot. But yes, Democrats, and what we often call left-wing Democrats, are in that lower left quadrant a lot, a lot. There's polling results which we commissioned lately, and it's not public yet. But yeah, over 60% of the lower left is Democrats, and it's even higher in the upper right for Republicans. There's almost no Democrats in the upper right, very few Republicans in the lower left. These are big. This is where Bernie lives, right? I mean, Bernie lives in the lower left. He definitely is a big government guy who is obsessed, if you will, with wealth inequality. And, Ted Cruz would be his political opposite, maybe. You can think of others. But yeah, he doesn't care much about wealth inequality. He will talk about size of government a lot. A lot of Republicans do. And so those are the quadrants. Those are those two. Strangely enough, the centrists, and this might be an insight that helps explain what's going on now. The centrists are very small. There's not many people that will answer no to both those questions. But most of our political establishment is in that lower right. So I would categorize McConnell down there. I would put Schumer down there. I would put Biden down there, Bush's down there, etc. They generally don't. They couldn't care less the government gets bigger. Obviously, they keep doing it, and they couldn't care less that the wealth gets more unequal. They keep doing that too. So that's pretty much the center. And you can see the American people are frustrated because that center is giving way. And it's getting more bitter. People hate that in our politics. It's more polarized, which it is more polarized. If the way to come together, incidentally, which is, well, Kennedy likes the phrase. We're all affiliated with Kennedy somewhat, and he likes to say heal the divide. The way to heal the divide is to move, strangely enough, not lower right. That's nobody lives down there anymore. It's to move upper left. And believe it or not, you'll get a lot of agreement from people who are independent, also Republicans and Democrats that actually want to move there, and they just don't get hurt. That's really how you heal the divide in American politics. I'll stop. You guys can.
The lower right, Lloyd, to me is where the middle class gets eviscerated, and basically leading us off a cliff that way.
Amen.
I want to get to Bobby Kennedy in a moment, because I do think that he is that upper left solution in many ways. I'm not sure 100%, but the things you're talking about reveal some of the sins of our system over the last several decades that perhaps a lot of people have either been blind to or just not wanted to take a look at. And I'll give you an example. As wealth inequality was growing in the 90s, in the 2000s, in the 2010s, we started to see this massive movement of wealth from the majority to the top 1/10 of 1% or the top 1%. And this was commensurate with an increasing debt burden at the federal level. So we started borrowing money in the trillions. And of course, we put that on steroids during the pandemic when the amount of money printing was north of $4 trillion. Virtually all of that went to that top 1/10 of 1%. So we have these massive billionaire class folks, right? We were creating a billionaire a day, basically, during that time, while the 90% of the population is struggling more today than it was before the pandemic. Now, for a long time, and this is where I have some issues with the right because of their kind of blind eye toward the idea that we hold up these billionaires as heroes, as if we would take Bedford Falls, if you saw It's a Wonderful Life, and we took Bedford Falls and we turned it into Pottersville, and we wanted to hold up Mr. Potter as the hero because he was rich, and there was no sense.
You may have lost Andrew with that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
There was no sense of perspective and proportion there, right? nobody really asked, how are they becoming rich, right? And this is where I want to get into Bobby Kennedy's vision of capitalism and what capitalism really is and how it needs to be harnessed to a social purpose, right? And then, of course, the left comes in and they love the idea of working together with these industries and these executives, particularly in technology and certainly healthcare and other industries where their palms get greased, government gets bigger, they stay in power. It's part of, and I think most people are beginning to see this incestuous relationship that's been brewing now, and how the average person is really paying the price for that, right? So this grid is to me describing a long-term trend that's been developing in this country. And yes, government is way too big, bloated, right? They're not serving the people. Who are they serving? The donors, the donor class, those who are helping keep them in power, right? And I think Bobby Kennedy wants to return government to serving the people. You know? Yeah, yeah.
Jefferson did. Guarantee you that. Jefferson,
Yeah.
if you go and read some of his letters, I won't go into this too much. These terms, left and right, are post-French Revolution terms. We use them a lot in American politics. We talk about liberals, conservatives. The founders didn't use those terms. The terms they used were Whig and Tory. Okay, that's older British political terms. And by Whig, Jefferson meant, and he means the upper left, strangely enough, but he means trust the people, let the people govern themselves, leave them alone. It's very middle class. And then the Tories are kind of, that's the Hamiltonians a little bit more. It's the big banking interest, the aristocrats, people like that, and they don't trust the people. They want to run their lives. These are the ancient political axes that Jefferson saw. What I think is what I'll just say this. I'll let Andrew talk a little bit more here too, but it always encourages me because I share this belief that Paul expressed from the very beginning. There's a lot more insight in this simple map that people may realize. And believe me, we could talk a long time about some of the ramifications, the long-term trend that you see in this, because what have we done the past century? Not just since the 90s, but even since the progressive era, Woodrow Wilson. We complained about these inequalities of wealth for a long time and the power in the rich and powerful. And then we increased the government repeatedly to try and fix that and kept making it worse. And we literally have a situation in America. We have never had a bigger government in our history. Even World War II, that government was not the size it is today. That's scary. And we have the worst inequality in the past 100 years. It has fixed none of that. That's a serious problem that we need to quit thinking that it solves it. It doesn't solve it.
It doesn't. And we're not only paying with our wallets now, we're paying with years of our lives, with our health. Healthcare is an abomination in this country. The healthcare industry is profiting off of sickness, not wellness. The food industry, the healthcare industry, they don't promote wellness because it's not in their financial interest. So they work with government. This is a collusive effort, and they have these policies. The government gives them these policies that allow them to get away with ingredients in foods, FDA approval of things, and we could go into who funds the FDA. I mean, we have separate podcasts for that. We'll be here for hours. But this is what happens when government gets too big, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have an EPA that's working for the people. You have an EPA that is protecting the industry. Now, Andrew, I know you know about this, right? You and I were talking about Coldwater Creek in Missouri a little earlier. So, do you want to talk about that, or however you want to put it? Go right
Yeah, we
ahead.
could talk about it a little bit. It's been a very hot issue recently over in Missouri. You see Senator Josh Hawley talking about it, and Representative Cori Bush, two very different politically members of Congress, talking about an issue that affects all of us, which is the environment. And of course, Hawley's taken the time to bash the EPA, and a lot of environmental groups in the area have been fighting this for quite some time, and nothing's been done. The EPA refuses to look into it, and so it affects our community, not just the environment, the plants and the animals and the ecology, but also the health and well-being of those within the community. It's caused a spike in cancer and other chronic disease. And so that's just an area where, you have a large government agency such as the EPA falling short, where its sole purpose is to protect the environment. It's literally in the name, and they're failing to do so, and it's causing people to get sick, and it's doing a lot of damage to our environment as well. And of course, there's money to be made in that. And that's an area where I think, Bobby Kennedy, of course, is very good at, being an environmental lawyer. And so I'd like to see him address the issue and, maybe even help out. It's a great opportunity between, a Republican senator and a Democrat representative. And then here you have an independent presidential candidate come in and speak on it. That's a good, that's how you heal the divide. And we could also go into the details of proposing upper left policies and solutions for the environment. Lloyd and I are going to meet with our buddy Bob tomorrow to kind of break down more and more upper left policies. We're kind of laying out an upper left platform that we're working on currently. So, yeah.
Does an independent candidate, Andrew, in your mind, necessarily move us in the direction of that northwest quadrant there?
Well, considering that a majority of independents out of the poll that Lloyd was talking about earlier, the independents overwhelmed both Democrats and Republicans. They were the number one group that identified as being upper left. And so I think a lot of independents are moving in that direction. If not, they're already there. And of course, we've also seen Democrats and Republicans identify as being upper left, while their parties are not. And so I think, the greatest opportunity, of course, lies in the upper left, since so many people identify with wanting smaller government and less wealth inequality. So I think that's definitely where the independent and incidentally, I believe the third party movement needs to move. So I think there's great opportunity there for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Too,
yeah,
I don't know if, and even say, I think the two-party system has been a rigged game for quite some time. And I think it is easier for, I'll call them plutocrats, but I think the rich and powerful in particular can game this system a lot easier when they can play those two wings against each other that you see and kind of channel all the compromises into that lower right corner. That's what's been going on for a long time. Mm-hmm. The only way to break free that I see is to get outside that two-party system. As much as, and I'm not a huge Trump fan. I do prefer him to Biden if you're going to force me to say it, but I hate to say it, frankly. But I don't necessarily prefer him to Obama. So it's not with me, donkey elephant. I just thought Trump was way outside the box, but he's still inside that two-party box. He's definitely too far inside it for my taste. And I think you have to get outside in order to move the system. Kennedy offers that. He is probably the strongest alternative outside the two-party system since Perot. Okay, and before that, it would have been George Wallace. So you got, it happens once in a while, but we have not really had an outside challenge to the two-party system in 100 years. I mean, it was Teddy Roosevelt, 1912, who actually beat the Republican Taft as a progressive. It was called Progressive Party, Bull Moose Party. But think about this for a second, but in the first 70 years of the country's history, from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln, this country elected presidents from 5 different political parties.
Hmm.
And we've
Hmm.
had nothing but this two-party thing, and it's
Sure.
way too controlled, in my opinion. So yeah, I
And
do think, yeah,
that's why it's moved to that lower right,
I
because
believe
it's a
so.
two-party system.
I
Yes.
I actually believe so. Yes, that's part of what
Yeah.
it's what I see in the chart sometimes.
A hundred
Forgive me,
percent.
but I
Yeah.
read that into it at times. Yes, I
And
do.
I'm going to make a statement here, and something I've said often, and I truly believe this. I believe that Bobby Kennedy is the most transformational political figure of my lifetime, and probably in 100 years, going back to Teddy Roosevelt, Lloyd. I do believe that to be true, and it's at least as much because of his life experience, his principles, his character, that what he brings to the table is honor to the presidency, and I think honestly that's what differentiates him from the other two candidates who may say one thing, tell people what they want to hear, kind of this dog whistle approach, right? But Bobby Kennedy walks the walk. He doesn't talk about cleaning up the environment. He fights to clean up the environment, and he's been doing it for decades. He's willing to go the extra yard. He does it all the time for people that are less fortunate, and doesn't do it for the headlines. It's more like he wakes up every morning and says, and these are his words, reporting for duty, sir. What's the next right thing for me to do? And he does it without regard to the way it looks to the outside world. Now, those are the qualities I look for in a president. I haven't seen that in my lifetime. Maybe bits and pieces of it from different candidates, but Bobby Kennedy, and I think a lot of this is informed by his experience with his father and his uncle, and his view of the world and the path that he took personally, which was a significant detour early in his life, but having found that path of redemption, I think it's propelled him to higher highs, higher heights than almost anyone would otherwise be capable of. And Andrew, it's not just Coldwater Creek, right? It's we're talking about other parts of the country, the Norfolk Southern. It's the breakdown of government, right? It it's they've just let the people down. They have let the people down. You know.
Yeah, I can't really refute those things about Kennedy. I think what you're saying about him is correct, and I view him as an honest man of integrity and all that. And that is, if you were to ask me, the most important thing you need in a leader, and what our system desperately lacks, it's just simple honesty and integrity. We've been lied to a lot in the baby boomer lifetimes, and frankly, also in Andrew's short span on the earth too, in the millennial short span. So yeah, honesty is the most important thing you want in a political figure. And our politicians are corrupt as
Mm-hmm.
they can be, and it comes across people. I would say even more than that is needed to fix these problems. The
Yeah.
direction in which we move is also critical. It's not just like I'm not looking to elect a king for America. I'm not looking to say, oh, I trust this man, make him king, he will decide for us. Uh-uh. Those days are gone with me. I want Lincoln. Lincoln's one of my favorite presidents. Washington is a good president. Jefferson a good president. They told people what they were going to do and they did it. That is what I'm looking for in a president. And I'm not hearing it as much as I want from Kennedy yet. I think he's capable of it. I do, but I don't think he's done it yet. So
Uh, Today is my wife's birthday, and we went this past weekend. We went to see the show Hamilton on Broadway as my birthday present to her. So I got a bird's eye view on the Broadway take on Hamilton, Jefferson, George Washington, uh, and side note, guys, phenomenal performance. Just a,
yeah,
a must see if you're ever in New York. Yeah. Um, so, Andrew, you've been involved with the Kennedy campaign for quite a while now. I think you organized an event starting last year, which is where you met Lloyd. What have you learned about the campaign, the candidate? Any insights you'd like to share with us?
Oh, yes, absolutely. This campaign and the journey I've been on with it has been almost a year exactly in the making. I actually started my journey with Kennedy back in last April when I flew. I made an impulsive decision, I guess you could call it, to fly to Boston to see his announcement. Um, and that was an incredible experience, just trying to kind of get my foot into the political scene. I studied political science at the University of Evansville and graduated with a bachelor's degree in that with minors in law, history, and international studies. And so I live for this stuff. And so I thought Kennedy was the best, you know, option when I went to see him give his announcement, because I wasn't going to support Trump or Biden this election, and I wanted an alternative and found one in him. Of course, he was running as a Democrat at the time. I didn't know he was going to go independent. And so yeah, I've organized events across Missouri. That's where Lloyd and I met, and I took to the Upper Left very quickly. And just recently, I fully understood why I took to that, because I'd written my senior thesis in college about trying to understand how the American electorate feels about government when it comes to solving economic and social issues. And so when I go back and read through that, I kind of see that why I understood this so well. And ever since then, I've been trying to implement these ideas, and trying to look at the world through an upper left lens. Maybe not on every issue, because it doesn't exactly apply to every issue, but you can make the case for some, for most, especially economic issues. And so I've just met a lot of people from all different walks of life along the Kennedy campaign's path. I've met people on the left, on the right. I've met former Trump fans, and one guy I even met was he was actually at the parade that you and I were at, Lloyd. He was a self-proclaimed Marxist. And I thought, wow, this is interesting, a Marxist supporting a Kennedy. But anyway, yeah.
There's a lot of undeclared Marxists out there too.
So the Kennedy campaign is driving its bus right down the center of Main Street, USA. That's what we're doing, and we're casting our net from the center, far and wide. There'll be a couple of people on the extremes, on the outskirts that won't budge. They'll dig their heels in and stay in that tribalist rhetoric and hunker down in their ways, right? But if you're open-minded, if you're a critical thinker, if you're non-programmable, you will look at this man and this platform and say to yourself, holy shit, this is the man I've been waiting for. This is the candidate for America, to lead America. I have full faith in anyone who takes an honest look that they'll come to that conclusion,
Yeah.
as I know you have, Andrew. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so when it comes to when it comes to the upper left and Kennedy, one day I was laying on my couch and I was thinking about this, and Lloyd and I were talking, and I was trying to apply, heal the divide to the upper left. And so what I realized, as someone who's studied, politics for over 4 years, and the current narrative in the United States is that the current division in America is actually, they say it's between the lower left and the upper right. That's where the divide is. You've got the Democrats versus the Republicans, and everybody's at each other's throats. And as we said earlier, where people come together is in the lower right, and that's where the so-called uniparty resides. Everybody talks about the uniparty, and as we've said earlier, that's where they agree on raising the income inequality, because they benefit from it, and they benefit from a bigger government as well. So I would like to think that the actual divide in the United States is more so, it's not between the lower left and the upper right. It's more so the upper left quadrant against the lower right quadrant. And I think, the message of heal the divide, how you go about doing that is by, you've already got a lot of people, independents and even Democrats and Republicans, who identify as upper left, but then you have those within the lower left and the upper right, and how you bring them together and we're going to look at maybe pulling some of the third parties, such as the Greens and the Libertarians, on this, because we have reason to believe that the Greens are just the even lower left part of the Democrats. They pull the Democrats more towards equality. Meanwhile, you've got the Libertarians in the upper right pulling them towards smaller government. And so we think that healing the divide is through convincing the lower left to move towards smaller government and to convince the upper right to move towards more equality. And you can you can list policies that you have to compromise on. Either you can tell the lower left, if you care a lot about the wealth inequality, we can accomplish that by shrinking government if they can compromise on size of government. Meanwhile, in the upper right, they want to shrink the government. Well, you can shrink the government in a way that reduces wealth inequality too. So you make that compromise, it moves them towards the upper left. And I think Bobby Kennedy is someone
Andrew, God forbid, Andrew, that you start talking like balanced budgets to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. But when looking at Bobby Kennedy as a person, I've had the time I've met him several times. I've spoken with him, and I've actually introduced the upper left to him directly while I was at a private reception in Livonia, Michigan. I had a couple minutes with him, and I explained this to him. And the reason why I thought he would take to it is because when he talks about COVID, he talks about the mandates, the lockdowns. Those are clearly big government, policies. Meanwhile, he also addresses that in the process of the pandemic, you stole the wealth from the middle and lower class and shifted it upwards. Trillions of dollars worth of wealth shifted up. That's clearly a wealth inequality issue. And so I really think he has the potential to be an upper left candidate. And so I presented this to him and asked him the two questions. And he stopped me. He looked me in the eyes and he told me, "You have me sold," And so that was an incredible moment. And I actually I handed over a document that I had typed up for him and, had been in communication with him about it. And so I think the greatest case for an upper left candidate this election cycle is currently Bobby Kennedy. And so, yeah.
Well, you came prepared. That's quite a story, and it makes total sense to me that he would say, "You have me sold," because that to me is who he is. And it reminds me of this quote that Bobby offers us, where he says, and I'm reading this because I have a list of his quotes here: "If the king and the queen are looking over the castle wall and their subjects are fighting each other, they go back into the party and pop champagne, because as long as the people are fighting each other, nobody is coming over that castle wall." And he wants to lead a movement for those people who are fighting each other to coalesce and go over that castle wall and take on that lower right quadrant there, right? That is decimating the people, and on so many levels, And I also met Mr. Kennedy, and I've communicated with him on a number of occasions. And he's such a gentleman, right? He's such a gentleman, so down to earth and humble. And I personally believe that we talked about the important qualities of character and moral compass and all of that. The humility that he brings to the role of candidate and president, to me, is stunning and so important.
My emphasis on policy goals again. And, I will share an anecdote that I had at a high school reunion. A woman that I'd known since high school, who was very much a Democrat, very much in the lower left, I'd say. Her concern is with the poor. And I was promoting this idea like I often do, anecdotally. And basically she told me, she was concerned about the poor. I said, what if I can come up with a way to help the poor and even the middle class that actually shrinks the government, doesn't grow it? Would you agree? Would you support that policy? And of course she says, well, you can't do that. It's not doable anyway. And I said, well, what if I could? What if I can come up with a policy that will actually do what you want, help the poor and the middle class, but at the same time shrink the government, would you oppose it? Or would you support it? She said, well, I guess if you could do it, I'd support it. I told her, here it is. Abolish the taxes completely on the poor and the middle class. Put the entire tax burden on the wealthy. I just shrank the government big time, and I just helped the poor and the middle class more than you ever will. They're not paying any more taxes. She thought, wow. And now I got it sold. Now I had a true person concerned about the poor and the middle. They're sold. That's where the rubber meets the road. To me, it is coming up with these policies that everybody will see. Yep, that sure does work, doesn't it? Yes, it moves this country upper left, I'll tell you that. And I need Kennedy to advocate policies like that. That clearly, that obviously, then we're going to get the revolution that I think we're going to move this country back in that upper left direction.
I'd like to have a deeper discussion with you at some point on that, Lloyd, because that is fascinating. That's the first I've heard of that. But yeah, listen, we know
it was
that
in the article you published in the Falconer, incidentally. Okay,
that section,
this is in that article.
It's my memory. So
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's Lloyd is referring to our People for Kennedy website. And the Falconer is a collection of articles written by people just like Lloyd and myself and many others. We have 50 articles on the site now, so worthy of your attention. Lloyd, yours actually was sent out to our mailing list recently. That article was sent out as part of an outgoing mailing to several thousand people. So if you're tracking it, you'll see that it had many views.
I was a recipient of that, and it confirmed my fear. It was too long. It was too long. So maybe we work together. We shorten it even more next time.
It's hard. I can relate. My articles. I write an article and people say, Paul, can you shorten that up by like a couple of thousand words?
Yeah, I hear you.
You have so much to say, and what we know is, left unchecked, the government is just going to continue to roll up debt in the trillions commensurately. The billionaire class is going to grow at the expense of the middle class. And it's not just the actual outright tax rate, right? It's the hidden tax of inflation. It's the hidden tax of health atrocities, which, we're not just paying with our checkbooks, we're paying with our health, with years of our lives, dying sooner. This is, Callie Means talks about it as, genocide. And if Bobby wins, this man will have an important role in his government to address this.
We'll have to get on again sometime and talk a little bit more about this, because we could talk about this for hours. I've written several. I actually have two articles. I have two articles that I've written myself on this. One from a young political scientist's perspective, and then I've written another article about Joe Rogan has talked about on his podcast about implying this class of the politically homeless and trying to figure out where they exist, where they live in this vast political spectrum or within our map. And I've written an article basically talking about how I believe that, the politically homeless are in the upper left. That's where their homestead's at. And I also think that Joe Rogan himself is also an upper leftist. He just doesn't know it yet. So.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for hearing us out too, and for also sharing the core idea. Yeah, we all share it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul.